Illinois agriculture extremely important to the state's economy, and exports really a driving factor to just how well Illinois farmers could do when it comes to things like soybeans and corn. And in the middle of harvest, you've got ongoing conversations about tariffs and how that's going to be impacting people. But we also have the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, food subsidies, taxpayer benefits that go to those who need it most. SNAP's going to come to an end November 1st if the federal government shutdown persists. And the latest now with Illinois in Focus Daily. I'm Greg Bishop with you each and every weekday morning. Get the podcast where you get podcasts, but you can also wake up and get the headlines at thecentersquare.com. So we've got the story at the Center Square where you can read about SNAP benefits, how they could be suspended if the funding lapse from the federal government continues. You can see that story we published on Friday. Pritzker looking at how Illinois can cover looming SNAP funding lapse. And here's the governor talking a bit about what exactly the Illinois Department of Human Services heard from federal agencies is going to happen whenever November 1st comes around. 1.9 million Illinoisans could lose or at least have their SNAP program benefits suspended until the government reopens. Here's the governor on Friday being asked about that particular issue.
Trump's shutdown of the government is going to, on November 1, cause people to lose their SNAP benefits. These are people who depend upon SNAP benefits to feed their families. And the answer to that is there is no reimbursement of the state if those SNAP benefits are lost. I asked that question immediately. There obviously is a big challenge for a lot of families, across hundreds of thousands of families across Illinois. And we're looking at ways that we might be able to at least augment what they're not going to get. So on top of zero, we're going to try to do something. And of course, make sure that they know how they can feed their families during this difficult time without SNAP benefit cards. They have threatened, I just want you to know, this is what the federal government is doing, and if I sound like I'm hypercritical, it's because I am. This is wrong. They are talking about actually disabling the machines that where you can swipe your SNAP card during this period. Why is that something they shouldn't do? Because we could perhaps provide some benefits to people. It would have to be on those cards, though. There's no way to get money in people's hands faster. And fast enough. But because they want to punish people during a period where the administration is unwilling to sit down and negotiate or just follow through on promises, we may actually have people who are unable to feed themselves. So we're working on it. We're trying to figure out what we can do and what we can afford to do to support people, and how we might be able to support pantries, food pantries across the state, if they are where everybody is turning to. But we don't have a full-on solution because the federal government really is the provider of all of the SNAP funds. It's not a state program. It's a federal program that we administer. But they are making it near impossible. So I'm hoping that the shutdown will end before November 1st. That is going to be up to the president.
Now, the Democrats obviously are taking an approach in the U.S. Senate of not supporting the continuing resolution to keep the government open. And now we're in week 3. The government funding lapse started October 1st, and here we are now October 20th. And where this is going to go from here, we'll see what happens this week in the U.S. Senate. But Democrats have been holding out for some kind of health bill policy to pass. But this is November 1st going to impact 1.9 million Illinoisans. And just to put it into context, how much taxpayer dollars from the federal government goes to Illinois for SNAP benefits? It's about $700+ million a year. So it's a lot of money. And then you got to work into the estimates the state has on when the government does open back up. They're going to have new eligibility requirements that could, put some barriers in place for those who were getting benefits. And the estimate there is 300,000+ could be impacted by those work requirements, just having to prove that they're either working or unable to work and so on. But You also have the error rate of SNAP and the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. Error rate in Illinois is like 11.5%, when back in 2015 or so, it was down to like 5-6% or something to that effect. Well, if we don't get that error rate down, it's going to also cost Illinois taxpayers potentially hundreds of millions of dollars. Now, SNAP obviously really tied and connected to the Farm Bill and farmers and agriculture and so on, because obviously agriculture is a huge industry. Well, in Illinois, you've got agriculture, Pritzker said, being impacted. On Friday, he was asked about soybeans, for instance, and trade and tariff policies. Here's Pritzker talking about that.
So, I mean, we're talking about, I believe, more than $12 billion of sales from Illinois soybean farmers that normally would be sold to China if we had just regular trade going on. It's not something special. That's just what it would be this year if not for the tariffs and the tariff war that has ensued from the administration. So there isn't a solution to this, but I can tell you it's abominable that the federal government is providing $20 billion to bail out the Argentine economy, and that has allowed Argentina to now trade their soybeans with China. And we're talking about replacing almost all of what Illinois would have provided. And it's, again, because they've prioritized in Washington the foreign government of Argentina over the farmers of Illinois.
So we'll hear a little bit more what the president had to say about Argentina, because he was asked about that last night. So that was the governor Friday. Last night, the president coming back on Air Force One, talking about trade and tariff policies with China, especially when it comes to tariffs, and the purchase of soybeans.
Are you confident that
I want them to buy soybeans. One of the things I want is China's going to buy soybeans. I want China to stop with the fentanyl. Very, normal things. I don't want them to play the rare earth game with us.
But you want them to, but do you think they will make a deal on soybeans?
I do believe, because otherwise I'm not going to make a deal. No, I want them to buy. Our farmers have been boycotted by China as a negotiating point. I don't want that. Our farmers are great, and in particular our soybean farmers, and I want them to start buying soybeans at least in the amount that they were buying before. And I believe they'll be able to do
But
it.
sticking with soybeans, and in Argentina, you're looking to do that deal with Argentina, let me also. So,
With respect to beef?
Yeah, so we'll hear the president here talk about beef in a moment, and Argentina, which you heard President Trump, earlier in the later part of the week last week, met with the Argentinian president, and that the country's going through an interesting kind of revolution of sorts, from being somewhat of a socialist country to more of a free market type of country with the new president there. But you've got Governor J.B. Pritzker critical of the Trump administration for favoring Argentina with a certain trade deal, and one of those things was beef, which the president talked about, saying that they're going to have U.S. tax dollars go to help facilitate the sale of Argentinian beef to the United States marketplace.
To get beef prices down. The only price we have that's high is beef, and we'll get that down. And one of the things we're thinking about doing is beef from Argentina.
but my question is, what do you have to say to U.S. farmers who feel that the deal is benefiting Argentina more than it is them, as they are a top
Argentina's fighting for its life, young lady. You don't know anything about it. They're fighting for their life. Nothing's benefiting Argentina. They're fighting for their life. You understand what that means? They have no money. They have no anything. They're fighting so hard to survive. If I can help them survive in a free world, I happen to like the president of Argentina. I think he's trying to do the best he can, but don't make it sound like they're doing great. They are dying. All right? They're dying.
What do you mean by a beef deal, sir?
We would buy some beef from Argentina. If we do that, that will bring our beef prices down. Because our groceries are down, our energy prices are down. Well, I think we're going to have $2 gasoline pretty soon. We're getting close. And everything's down. The one thing that's kept up is beef. And if we buy some beef, now I'm not talking about that much from Argentina, it would help Argentina, which we consider a very good country, a very good ally in a place. Although I must tell you, if you take a look now, South America is turning. The South American countries are starting to turn very much toward us.
And for you
They're getting away from socialism, and you can go right down the pack. But they are starting to turn. It's pretty amazing.
How how this transpires, especially with soybeans being a major exporter for Illinois farmers, and they're going to have access to the market in China. What about this beef imports that we're going to get from Argentina? How's that going to impact Illinois farmers? Obviously, there's a lot going on here. Illinois asking the U.S. Supreme Court to take the case challenging the use of the National Guard for public safety. Good morning. It's Illinois in Focus Daily. I'm Greg Bishop with you each and every weekday morning here for the Center Square. I'm the editor. My team and I, we bring you the latest, and we've got some of the ongoing back and forth about whether or not President Donald Trump can use the National Guard for public safety. So let's go ahead and get on into it. Be sure to get to the website, thecentersquare.com, where you can sign up for the newsletter each and every weekday morning. And you might notice a little different space than what we typically have at the home office. I'm on the road, making sure that we've got an alternate way to get the show out to you after yesterday, some AWS problems messing some stuff up. And some people already noticing in the live chat. Yes, some new music. It's stuff I've had in the past. I just didn't use it here for Illinois in Focus. But as I'm remote, I had some access to my tunes and pulled in some new music, so hopefully you guys enjoyed that. But let's get into it, all right? So go to the website, thecentersquare.com, click on Illinois, and you'll be able to see the latest headline. Illinois asks Supreme Court not to give authority over to National Guard. To give Trump authority over the National Guard. So let's go ahead and read this. All right, the state of Illinois asked the U.S. Supreme Court not to hear President Donald Trump's request to deploy the National Guard to Chicago amid disagreement about plans for immigration enforcement in the state's most populous city. Top attorneys for Illinois and Chicago said that Trump has overstepped his authority. They were joined by officials from Los Angeles, California, and elsewhere in the legal fight over who controls troops. Now, here's a quote from the Attorney General's office from Illinois saying that the court should decline applicants' request to unsettle the equitable judgments reflected in the Seventh Circuit's order and to take the dramatic step of permitting deployment of National Guard troops over Illinois' objections for the handful of days the temporary restraining order currently remains in effect. Illinois Attorney General Kwame Raoul's legal team wrote in a legal filing. Now, what's interesting here is, give us some background. So you've got the president having talked for weeks about wanting to get the National Guard into Chicago, saying he's going to save Chicago, make Chicago safe again. And Governor J.B. Pritzker pushed back. You had Democrats essentially saying that Trump was being an authoritarian and he was going to use the military. Even the governor saying that he's not a conspiracy theorist, but he believes that Trump wants to use the military to influence the 2026 election. But you had the president use the National Guard over in Los Angeles whenever there were protests that turned violent against immigration enforcement. That was challenged in the courts. And then you had the president use the National Guard in Oregon, and that was challenged in the courts. And then you had the president working with local officials in Memphis to have the National Guard. All of this while the president had previously used the National Guard in Washington, D.C., and I believe still is, to clean up public safety in the nation's capital. Now, the president has that authority, though it's limited for the nation's capital. The arguments are that the president does not have the authority to use the National Guard for public safety. But if you look at the orders from the U.S. Northern Command about the deployment of troops in Illinois, it was to protect federal agencies and federal personnel and their equipment and their property and their persons, because you've seen that some of the things can get chaotic whenever ICE is on the ground performing immigration enforcement. And again, in Illinois, you have federal officials saying they have to flood the zone because of the state's migrant sanctuary policies. So let's go back over to the article that Brett Rowland from the Center Square put together. The state and other challenged Trump's authority to deploy the National Guard to cities over objections of local leaders. Illinois officials said that federal authorities aren't needed. Applicants' contrary arguments rest on mischaracterizations of the factual record of the lower court's views of the legal principle, the state said in its response. As the district court found, state and local law enforcement officers have handled isolated protest activities in Illinois, and there's no credible evidence to the contrary. Now, on the side of the Trump administration, America First Policy Institute, a nonprofit group, said that Trump should control the orders over the National Guard. They said plaintiffs have asserted 9 claims, each of which is a variation of the same underlying request for the federal courts to second-guess the president's determination that the conditions for federalizing the National Guard have been satisfied here. Attorneys for the group wrote, "There is no express private cause of action to bring these claims, and for nearly 200 years this court has recognized that the president's determination is non-justiciable." Filings in the Illinois case came the same day that a 3-judge panel of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit overturned a temporary restraining order issued by a federal judge in Portland, Oregon, removing a judicial obstruction that prevented Trump from sending Oregon National Guard troops to Portland. The ruling comes in the wake of Trump deploying National Guard troops to U.S. cities, including Los Angeles, Washington, D.C., Portland, Memphis, and Chicago to protect the work of U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement agents. Agents have been attacked, hampered by agitators and protesters against ICE enforcement in U.S. cities. The legal battles continued to move on multiple fronts, and that's the expectation. And while the hundreds of National Guard troops are already in Illinois, U.S. District Judge Amy Perry stopped their deployment. She said she found federal officials' assertions about coordinated violence by protesters unreliable. And we've seen the stories and the headlines come out of the Department of Homeland Security, where Kristi Noem has been pretty vocal about the increased attacks that she's seen on federal law enforcement enforcing immigration law. And she said that that's an ongoing issue, especially in states and jurisdictions that have migrant sanctuary policies. Here is Kristi Noem yesterday down in Florida, but she mentions Illinois and Governor J.B. Pritzker.
Administration.
And can you also talk about the communication between ICE and local law enforcement agents that...
We would love to have local law enforcement across the country participating with us. Many times that's not true. Here in Sarasota, it's been fantastic. Here in Florida, it's been amazing. But you go into other communities and other states, and many times those governors are political. Those leaders in those towns. Portland's a great example of the mayor who chooses to play politics instead of keeping his citizens safe. Governor Pritzker in Illinois is putting his people in danger every day by going against us and not working with us to make sure that we're detaining individuals who have criminal charges against them or have been convicted and then re-releasing them out on the streets. We're starting to see better partnership out of some law enforcement officers who recognize that their citizens feel differently than their political leaders. Their citizens recognize that they want their streets safer. We saw that in Washington, D.C., that people that experience the freedom of being able to walk down a street, go to a restaurant again, be able to, conduct normal life and let their kids play in a playground, they enjoyed it, and they let their political leaders know that, and they've cooperated with us more. We continue to have targeted operations in many, many cities, but also very focused on those where challenges are still remaining, such as Portland, Chicago. We're in Memphis as well. We're going into San Francisco at the direction of the president as well. We're going to continue to make sure we're focused not just in those cities that we hear about on the news, but also cities like Sarasota, that we make sure that law enforcement officers in every single community get the chance to continue to get these criminals off of their streets.
So again, that's Kristi Noem yesterday down in Florida talking about the need for continued federal efforts in protecting law enforcement officers, especially in migrant sanctuary jurisdictions. And will the U.S. Supreme Court act on the Trump administration's emergency motion before the temporary restraining order that was issued Thursday before last? So we're coming up on that 2-week window this Thursday of the temporary restraining order being lifted. Here we are Tuesday morning. We'll see where this goes in the U.S. Supreme Court.
It penalizes the very thing that we want, which is we want more employment in the city of Chicago. people, sometimes say, oh, Democrats, they're all socialists. There's some people who say that. I don't know. I'm a capitalist.
It's Governor J.B. Pritzker in front of the Economic Club of Chicago yesterday, where he sat down for a solid hour, taking all kinds of questions, including being asked about Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson's proposal for a head tax. Governor saying he opposes it. It is Illinois in Focus Daily. I'm Greg Bishop with you each and every weekday morning here for Illinois at the Center Square. Go to thecentersquare.com and sign up today for the newsletter, and you'll get headlines in your inbox each and every morning. Weekday mornings, we're here with you live for Illinois in Focus. If you can't catch the show live, totally understand. Plenty of people sounding off on these issues in the live chat on YouTube. But you can also get the podcast where you get podcasts. Just search Illinois in Focus. It's one of the top news podcasts of Illinois because we do deep dives. We go into the issues that, you're hearing and seeing, the quotes from the sources themselves. You're getting a general idea of what's going on in the state of Illinois, especially when we go back to fall veto session next week. It's going to be important to stay tuned to how your tax dollars are being used, what kind of oversight there is of government agencies and such, and the politics of all of it. So clearly, if you want to stay plugged into what's going on in Illinois, be sure to subscribe here with the Center Square and Illinois in Focus Daily. All right, so several things to tackle. The governor, wide-ranging interview. He sat down with a theater critic from a Chicago newspaper, and an interesting conversation in front of the Economic Club of Chicago, because the governor's on that board, and he's a philanthropist, being a billionaire. $3.6 billion. He helps fund all kinds of different nonprofit groups. A whole host of different money going all kinds of places. You donate tens of millions to one nonprofit, and then that nonprofit funnels money to other nonprofits, and some criticize it as money laundering. Either way, it's used for a lot of different liberal type of politics. But the governor in front of the Economic Club of Chicago was asked about the Chicago mayor's head tax. So Chicago's got a budget issue where they're $1 billion plus in the red for the upcoming budget. Chicago's budget is to the calendar year, so they have to have something passed before January 1st. It's different than the state's budget year, which starts July 1st. So here we are with the mayor having proposed his budget, and he's looking for, quote, progressive revenue. He says he's talking to state leaders to try to get that progressive revenue. But one thing he proposed is having a cloud tax that not too sure what that's going to be yet. But he also proposed a head tax on employees. So if an employer has more than 100 employees, they pay a tax per employee. And Governor J.B. Pritzker was asked about that yesterday and said that he is adamantly opposed to that idea. Here's the governor in front of the Economic Club.
I am absolutely foursquare opposed to a head tax for the city of Chicago. It penalizes the very thing that we want, which is we want more employment in the city of Chicago. And it makes it very hard to attract companies from outside of Chicago to come into Chicago, and harder for companies that are in Chicago to stay. And we're a state that had a bad reputation. And when I came into office, and I've spent 6.5 years trying to turn that reputation around, balance our budgets, attract businesses, create incentives for businesses, cut taxes, do everything that I could possibly do to attract new businesses and to keep businesses here, not just here, but growing here, expanding here. When they decide they want to do something new, I want them to do that here and not say, well, yeah, we've got our facility here, but the next facility we're going to build somewhere else. So that's, I think, all of our jobs in government, right? We need more jobs. And FYI, this is in the context of trying to balance a budget. There are three things and knobs you can turn, let's say, to balance a budget, right? One of them is you can cut expenditures. Another one is you can raise taxes, raise revenues that way. And the third one, and this is the one I prefer, is grow the economy, because your revenues increase if you grow the economy, right? And it helps you pay for the things that you think really matter. And so those are all three knobs that can be turned, but the economic growth one is the best for everybody. And so I think we ought to be focused on that most of all. But you got to balance the budget, there's no doubt about it. I prefer growing the economy to the other two methods.
Now, the governor has increased taxes on Illinoisans every year he's been in office, and one in particular, doubling of the state's gas tax in 2019. You've got increased gambling taxes, increased tobacco taxes, increased taxes on corporations. And I think some have pegged all of these like 50 some odd tax and fee increases. Plus, the governor has increased state spending considerably, 40+% since he's been in office. So higher taxes, the state's population for a decade, lost population. We lost seats in Congress over several decades because of declining population, and seems to have stagnated, at least for the last year, where we had more inbound people from other countries than we had people coming in from other states. People were moving to other states. That was offset by international migration into Illinois. That was just the last year's estimate. So we'll see what happens with new estimates in the future here. But clearly, Illinois has a host of issues. But the governor says he's not a socialist. He's a capitalist. And he believes in growing the economy to raise revenue for the state and local governments rather than increasing taxes. But does that match with what he's done over the past 6.5, 7 years? The governor, that's just one issue he talked about, the issue of the Chicago head tax proposal. But they opened up the Q&A with the question from the moderator that touched on a story of top story from last week, the governor's taxes that the Chicago Tribune reported on, and how much he made in gambling. But just an interesting way to kind of start the conversation yesterday in front of the Economic Club of Chicago.
It's a question about the odds. So I thought I'd ask it from one blackjack player to another blackjack player. There is
long odds.
Of different scales, I might add.
Now, that story's got a lot of reaction about the governor saying that he was with friends in Las Vegas and won $1.3 million or $1.4 million. Republicans say that just shows the governor's out of touch with the common man. You had Republican candidates for governor, Ted Dabrowski make that point, Darren Bailey make that point, Jim Mendrick, Sheriff DuPage County, also looking to get the GOP nomination for governor to take on Pritzker in 2026. He said that it shows that Pritzker treats his money like it's monopoly money and, again, is out of touch. So how that continues to play out in the political space, we'll see, but an interesting question to start off there. But the governor also touched on a variety of other things, including whether or not Chicago is going to get the DNC again, the Democratic National Convention for 2026, and is 2028, and is Governor J.B. Pritzker running for office.
And we've had more conventions than any other state. So I'm hopeful that they will, in fact, and that we will be able to host them again. But again, it takes a lot of organization. There's a whole lot between here and there. I just didn't want the convention folks to think that we're not in the running for 2028. More business, more people coming here. That's a great thing for the city and for the state.
But is he running for president?
The second part of the question is, I'm running for governor of Illinois.
And he's said that over and over again when asked if he's going to run for president. I think a lot of people just fully anticipate that when that time comes in 2028, the governor is going to make that announcement, and we'll see just how that goes. More from the governor. He was asked about the pension bill that he signed for the city of Chicago, and that bill, critics say, sweetens pensions for public safety, first responders. And the governor says that it's not a pension sweetener and criticized Chicago, who after the fact came out and said that they opposed it because it would cost the city of Chicago tens of millions of dollars and put them further behind the ball when it comes to getting their finances in order. And the governor was critical of Chicago for not speaking up faster about that particular bill. But even if they did, the measure passed overwhelmingly in the General Assembly.
It got passed nearly unanimously with a veto-proof majority. So let me just point that out when it landed on my desk. Number two, it was not a sweetener. You call it a sweetener. It was not a sweetener. These are the things that were promised to police and promised to firefighters. We already delivered for the firefighters. Are we not going to deliver for the police? And by the way, these are people I think all of us believe deserve to be paid what they've been promised. They do an unbelievably hard job, and they deserve it. It was not a sweetener. It was something that they were owed. And the city of Chicago has acknowledged that over many, many years. And one more thing, not a single time during the entire legislative session when this was being debated did the city of Chicago weigh in with their view. I'm talking about from January to May, we heard not a peep from the city of Chicago on this subject. So, the idea that the city was opposed to doing this and that the state did something that the city government didn't want to have done, I don't think is
Apologize about that. Live to tape, ladies and gentlemen. So the governor, he talked about Chicago, talked about the pensions, said that, critical of Chicago not speaking up enough about the pension sweetener, as critics call it, for first responders. It's going to cost the city of Chicago a whole bunch of money. I just got a text from somebody saying no sound. Appreciate you guys being on top of it. So, back at it. You've got the ongoing question of the pension and the veto-proof majority, and the governor said that he had no choice but to enact that. But the governor was also asked about national issues. You have the issue of redistricting, which we focused on, for like 2 or 3 weeks back in August, if you recall. And that's all stemming from Texas wanting to redistrict, and they had the Texas Democrats flee Texas to avoid that vote. Some came to Illinois, and the governor was talking about how the president in redistricting is him telling states to do it's bad, but these are all political calculations, and there is redistricting that happens every year after the census. Every 10 years, rather, after the census, but mid-cycle redistricting is very rare. States have the authority to do this. It's not illegal. They can change the districts however they want, but Democrats opposed that, and they're looking at redistricting in California. There's efforts to probably redistrict Illinois more, which is interesting because Illinois is a very gerrymandered state. It's been given an F grade by civic organizations, and it's unclear if they could gerrymander it anymore because of the 17 U.S. representatives we have, only 3 are Republican. Can they squeeze those Republicans out anymore? It's something I guess we'll see if that's what they want to do. Are they going to address this during fall veto session, or are they going to come back early January and redistrict? We shall see, which is interesting here because, we're already up against the filing deadline for the candidates who want to be on the 2026 ballot. So how's this going to play out? The governor, again, talking about this yesterday in front of the Economic Club of Chicago.
I don't think any of it's good. I don't want to do it for the state of Illinois. I don't think we should redistrict here. I have to say, though, that we live in, the most dangerous times that I can remember when it comes to preserving our democratic institutions. They are breaking them down everywhere what should we do? Should we just sit back and let it happen? What is it? I don't know what the right answer is, but I can tell you I'm not going to sit back and let it happen. I don't know that we should redistrict in Illinois, but I wonder if we should all say, well, it's okay, that Texas has done it, but it's not okay if California does it. And yeah, I don't like the results that you're describing either.
And the governor, again, hedging there, saying that, Republican states are doing this. Some Democrat states want to do it. Does Illinois want to do it? Again, be sure to subscribe. We'll keep you updated on what happens each and every weekday morning here with Illinois in Focus daily. And also you can get the headlines in your inbox at thecentersquare.com. Just sign up for the newsletter. Other issues the governor was asked about, again, in front of the Economic Club of Chicago, tons of issues, national issues, state issues. One thing that was asked up in Chicago, you've got the CTA, and their regional transit authorities facing a $200+ million fiscal cliff, possibly going to see some tax increases of some kind or possible fare increases for riders of mass transit in Chicagoland. How that's going to play out, again, fall veto session starts again next week, final 3 days. What are they going to do about that? But all that comes as you've got the federal government freezing more than $2 billion for Chicago Transit Authority expansion projects. And they froze that money, saying that they are looking into what the federal government alleges is discriminatory contracting practices, using diversity, equity, and inclusion, saying that that violates federal law and is discriminatory. Plus, could lead to potential waste and timing issues to get projects done. So the federal government froze those dollars, so that they could review that contracting. Pritzker was asked about that in the context of regional transit funding altogether, and here's the governor addressing that.
All I can say is, yeah, you can't build it without the $2+ billion that was supposed to come from the federal government, because there's no way for the state to make up for the money or Chicago to make up for the money. And that's true about a whole lot of things, I might add, that the federal government is walking away from. And it made promises, and it appropriated money, and it is under the law, and they walked away from these things. And they did it, so illegally, in my view, and they did it the President of the United States did it for partisan reasons only. That's what he's done across the country.
Now, the governor saying that Trump did this for partisan reasons, but again, I laid out that the Trump administration said that they're reviewing the funds because they feel that there could be discriminatory contracting practices with the city of Chicago. And to wrap things up, the governor talked about economics a bit more, and he said that he's not a socialist. He is a capitalist.
I believe that we need to grow our economy. People, sometimes say, oh, Democrats, they're all socialists. There's some people who say that. I don't know. I'm a capitalist. I think that more money made by all of you, more jobs you create, that's good for everything about the state of Illinois.
A lot said during that hour-long conversation. This was just a little smidgen of what was discussed. So you can find that entire conversation either at the governor's Facebook page or the Economic Club of Chicago streamed it as well. A lot said. I would encourage you, if you've got time during dinner or something while you're making the rounds, whatever you got to do, to listen into that.
We haven't served Chicago yet. When we do, Chicago will be very quickly a very, very safe city. But if you look at what's happening in Memphis, it's great. But you got to look at Washington. People are coming up to me, people that work in the White House, they're saying, "Thank you, sir," and I immediately know what they're thanking me about. It's thanking they can walk to work. They would never walk to work a year ago.
It's President Donald Trump yesterday talking about public safety in Chicago and referencing the efforts he's undertaken in other areas like Washington, D.C. And the governor today set to sign an executive order to address accountability with federal law enforcement on the ground in Illinois. It is Illinois in Focus Daily. I'm Greg Bishop with you each and every weekday morning, and tons to tackle with this story, as you've also got the U.S. Supreme Court still toying around with the issue of, can a temporary restraining order be reversed to allow for the Trump administration to have the National Guard protect federal assets and federal property and personnel. So that's the crux of this debate here. And also you get the immigration enforcement issue with a big raid in Little Village that happened yesterday morning, and a lot of reaction to all of that. So here with you each and every weekday morning, get the latest headlines at thecentersquare.com. So let's go ahead and Tuesday, Governor J.B. Pritzker was in front of the Economic Club of the city of Chicago, and he was talking about the criticism he's received about calling or comparing, because Pritzker says he's never called Republicans or Trump a Nazi, but he compares what he sees happening to the Nazis. And he says he gets criticized for that, the governor told the Economic Club of Chicago. Here's the governor explaining a bit more of that Tuesday.
Speak out. You are going to be subject to the criticism and the whims of a very vindictive president of the United States. I get that. But what are our alternatives? Do we, as happens in other authoritarian regimes, do we just give in and let it all happen, which, by the way, would lead to troops on the streets, troops possibly being on the streets for the elections in 2026? I mean, in ways that none of us have ever seen anything like that. But that is what would happen if we all just sat back and let it happen. And I mean, yeah, there are business people who've gone and cut deals and universities that have cut deals. I'm saying people need to stand up. This is the moment for people to stand up.
And the governor went on to have that conversation, comparing, again, the Pritzker administration to what he says was evident in Nazi Germany before World War II really broke out. So the governor making those statements, of course, kind of just reiterating what he said in the past about the Trump administration's efforts. He also, if you go to thecentersquare.com, you can see the story that the governor really pushed back on the Trump administration when it comes to sanctuary policies, and just how that is going to play out with the governor saying that he wants enforcement of immigration law, but not the way the Trump administration's doing it. And this is clearly something that we're going to watch at the State House next week if they do anything further to address immigration enforcement. But President Donald Trump said that he is going to make Chicago safe. Here he is yesterday, again, mentioning the city of Chicago.
We had the FBI in Chicago. We're doing things. We haven't served Chicago yet. When we do, Chicago will be very quickly a very, very safe city. But if you look at what's happening in Memphis, it's great. But you got to look at Washington. People are coming up to me, people that work in the White House, they're saying, "Thank you, sir." And I immediately know what they're thanking me about. It's thanking they can walk to work. They would never walk to work a year ago. They can walk into work and they feel safe and secure, and it's beautiful.
So the Trump administration is looking at where they've used the Guard before to essentially bolster their efforts in Chicago or in Portland or elsewhere throughout the country. But all of this coming as you've got video out of Little Village in Chicago of immigration enforcement. And I'd play the audio to this, but it's full of expletives. And this is just some of the video that's going around, but you could see some of the public getting up into the personal space of immigration enforcement officers. And the person behind the camera here saying, get the F out, calling them all kinds of words. I think they also say, Nazi, and you can see a certain hand gesture being used as law enforcement try to get back into their vehicle. And the people around the public, they start kicking the vehicle and more expletives and such. So you can see this is the type of thing that immigration enforcement is having to contend with in places like Chicago. And that's why ICE officials have noted they've seen 1,000% increase of attacks against ICE. You can go through the litany of other things that you've seen, the shooting in Texas where an assassin apparently was targeting ICE, but only shot ICE detainees and killed 2 of them. You've got the riotous behavior of some of the protesters. All of this around the enforcement of federal immigration law, and the Little Village raid has got the condemnation of Chicago Democrats. Congressman Chuy Garcia says what happened in the community was state-sponsored terrorism. Again, saying masked Gestapo, led by Gregory Bavino, conducted their campaign just a block from my house and at other locations in Little Village and Cicero. They abducted community members, U.S. citizens, one of whom is a local elected official and government staff. The reckless operatives once again endangered innocent lives with chemical agents, violent aggression, and high-speed chases through our neighborhoods that ended in yet another crash, another wreck in our streets. The federal government is assaulting our city and neighborhoods, Garcia said. For 6 weeks, my community has been the epicenter of the administration's brutal attacks. Our community is organized, and dozens of courageous civilian members of rapid response teams gathered quickly, blowing whistles to alert others of the presence of masked agents. My office is in contact with our local leaders and resistance networks, and we will provide supports to identify and assist the people who have been taken. In Chicago, we take care of our own. And he finishes off his statement there in Espanol. Interesting to read that, in particular, the resistance networks, and looking at it here too, and the community's organized, and dozens of courageous civilian members of rapid response teams gathered quickly, blowing whistles to alert others of the presence of masked agents. There's a lot of debate right now about websites that may be able to document ICE activity. There's been apps that have been taken off of the app stores, ICE trackers and things like that. So, a question here is, where is that line of impeding federal investigations and federal actions and going all the way up to possible insurrection? I mean, the president of the United States has said he could use the Insurrection Act to justify being on the ground with National Guard to protect ICE. And when you've got elected members of Congress talking about working with rapid response teams to quickly blow the whistle and alert others, and also working with, quote, resistance networks, that's some interesting phraseology that I think is going to get some more attention. Meanwhile, you've got the Chicago City Clerk also posting about this, saying this morning federal agents started detaining community members, including 2 Aldermatic staff persons who are City of Chicago employees and U.S. citizens from Little Village in the neighboring town of Cicero, without due process, creating unsafe conditions for everyone. You've got the statement there from the Chicago City Clerk. Another statement here from Governor J.B. Pritzker. He talked about fake ideas in the Trump administration, comparing them to Nazis. He went further to describe this, and this is from the Rapid Response 47, which is a Trump-affiliated social media account.
This is what happened. People's rights started getting taken away. People got accused of being immigrants. This is before the Holocaust really took place. People were accused of being immigrants, and then laws were passed to limit immigrants, and then people who weren't actually immigrants were called immigrants, and then it was othering people, and that led to a lot worse things. What I'm saying is that this is how authoritarian regimes do it. They create these kind of fake ideas that there's an enemy out there, and it could be sitting next to you at one of these tables. And so just somebody at your table that you don't like might be one of those enemies. And so let's round them up. Let's make sure that they are the subject of the laws that we're passing because we don't like who they are. That is what authoritarian regimes do. This is what happened.
So the governor, again, comparing the Trump actions enforcing federal immigration law after potentially 20 million people came across the border illegally in 4 years prior. You've got federal officials now with money to spend on going after federal immigration violations. And the governor's equating that to, what happened in Nazi Germany. All of this, the talk, the comments, the statements, that's all for public consumption, but where the action's actually going to happen is in the U.S. Supreme Court. We can go to the docket for the U.S. Supreme Court of the case Donald J. Trump, President of the United States, versus Illinois, appealing to the court. And they filed their most recent brief earlier this week, and we're just waiting on the Supreme Court to take some kind of emergency action on this. But you can see here, let's go ahead and go to the reply of Donald Trump and what he has to say in this filing to the U.S. Supreme Court. And you can just see from the table of contents here, the federal government is likely to succeed on the merits because this is all preliminary action in the Supreme Court about whether or not Trump can use the guard in Chicago. And you had a temporary restraining order that was issued 2 weeks ago. Here we are at the 2-week mark. And yesterday, the federal district judge extended their temporary restraining order until the merits are dealt with. But obviously, if the U.S. Supreme Court intervenes on an emergency motion from the Trump administration, it could reverse that temporary restraining order while they still have to deal with the merits. So we're only talking about and if you guys have followed the case, with the gun ban, you kind of understand the preliminary actions that are taken to have some kind of initial step taken to right a wrong. And when it came to temporary restraining orders for the gun ban, for instance, I mean, you had Thomas DeVore, an attorney, he had thousands of temporary restraining orders prohibiting the state from enforcing the law on those individuals and businesses he had secured temporary restraining orders for. That was not on the merits of any of this, right? The merits ultimately were decided a year later by a federal district judge in the Southern District of Illinois. That case obviously going all the way up to the appeals courts where we're still standing by for some kind of ruling. But just again, all of this preliminary stuff, even with the case where you've got the Trump administration having a temporary restraining order against them to block them from having National Guard troops on the streets of Chicago. So they took an emergency motion to the U.S. Supreme Court on the preliminary injunction. And that's what we're looking at here. So they say that the federal government is likely to succeed on the merits. The determination whether to call up the National Guard is committed exclusively to the president's discretion. The president lawfully invoked Section 12406. Respondents' 10th Amendment claim is derivative of their meritless statutory claim. The other factors support relief from the district court's order. The issues warrants this court's review, and the equities warrant a stay. So they're looking to essentially put the temporary restraining order at bay. So here's just a little bit of the background from the most recent filing from the Trump administration to the U.S. Supreme Court in this case. The president called up members of the National Guard to Illinois to protect federal personnel and property from violent resistance against the enforcement of federal immigration laws. Summarized in the application, DHS officials have explained in sworn declarations that, among other things, outside the Broadview facility, rioters have physically assaulted federal officers, thrown projectiles at them in obstructed vehicles so that Confederates could slash the tires. Elsewhere in Chicago, a multi-car convoy ambushed and rammed into a DHS vehicle and tried to run over one of the occupants, while criminal gangs and transnational cartels have placed 5-figure bounties on the heads of DHS personnel. State and local officials have not only failed to provide sufficient assistance to restrain and deter such violence, but fanned the flames of hostility by slandering DHS agents as rogue vigilantes and jackbooted thugs. DHS has been forced to divert resources from its primary immigration enforcement mission to ensure the safety of its personnel and property. And all of this is occurring against the backdrop of similar violence in other cities, including riots in Los Angeles and Portland, as well as a lethal attack on an ICE facility in Dallas. The president thus acted well within his statutory and constitutional authority by federalizing and deploying the National Guard in Illinois based on the determinations that he is unable with the regular forces to execute the laws of the United States, and that there is a rebellion or danger of a rebellion against the authority of the government of the United States. So again, you can see the justification here and how the U.S. Supreme Court is going to address this. We'll be watching that closely because, again, while today was the two-week mark from the original temporary restraining order the federal district judge issued, that district judge extended the TRO while we see what the U.S. Supreme Court does here. So we've got the final filings, some of the other filings from the court docket. Let's look at National Immigration Justice Center, American Rights Alliance. You've got a professor who's filing, the Chicago Headline Club filing amicus briefs. But let's go ahead and look at National Immigration Justice Center and their document they gave to the U.S. Supreme Court. And just, again, getting an overview here, they say the Broadview servicing staging area is operated at capacity and beyond. Operations of ICE in the Chicago area have increased and expanded in scope. The meaning of unable to execute the laws. Current enforcement tactics in Chicago focus on arresting non-citizens in neighborhoods, towns, and suburbs, meaning the troops would likely be in those communities. Granting the application would involve National Guard troops in such arrests. If the court grants a stay, it should explain its reasoning. So you can go through and read some of that as well. You can find all of these documents yourself. Just go to the U.S. Supreme Court website and search for Donald J. Trump, Illinois, and you'll be able to find the case and read through all of the legal filings that there are up to this point. And we'll be keeping an eye on this, so I would definitely encourage you to go and get the headlines in your inbox by going to thecentersquare.com. Governor J.B. Pritzker looking to hold the Trump administration accountable, alleging all kinds of abuses against the people of Chicago and the suburbs, immigration enforcement ongoing, and you got the Trump administration still at the U.S. Supreme Court asking them to intervene and let them have the Guard help the ICE agents on the ground. It's Illinois in Focus Daily. I'm Greg Bishop, editor at The Center Square. Go to thecentersquare.com and get the newsletter today. So Thursday morning, Governor J.B. Pritzker held a news conference, and he announced an executive order that he's signed that would essentially create the Illinois Accountability Commission. It's a new commission. It's got 3 different things it's focused on. One, getting a record of alleged abuses that Immigration and Customs Enforcement allegedly conducted against the people of Chicago, getting the impact on communities, and then also looking for justice and how to keep certain things from happening again. They have a deadline to get a report, this new commission, that's going to be under a already existing state agency, so there's going to be some taxpayer costs there. How much? Not revealed during the news conference yesterday, but the commission is going to take all kinds of testimony from people. They're going to put together a report. They're going to issue this report in January, and the governor says it's because Immigration and Customs Enforcement are coming at the Chicago community hard.
In the short time, we have witnessed countless acts of harassment and intimidation and brutality and abuse of power perpetrated against law-abiding civilians across our communities. Trump's masked agents have detained innocent American citizens and legal residents. They have used unmarked cars, a Black Hawk helicopter, automatic weapons, and battering rams to raid an apartment building filled with almost entirely, families and children. They've thrown tear gas and smoke grenades at peaceful crowds.
And we've seen also the evidence of individuals kicking ICE vehicles, getting into the federal agents' area where they're conducting operations, federal immigration enforcement. You have the Trump administration. You have the Trump administration filing to the U.S. Supreme Court with a list of all of the different kinds of conflicts they've had to face on the streets and how they've had to divert resources from DHS from other areas of enforcement to help protect federal assets in Illinois. And all that's part of the conversation of, can Trump use the National Guard? So Pritzker Thursday, during the news conference announcing the executive order that he signed to create this Illinois Accountability Commission, he talked about how he believes that the ICE officials and Trump administration individuals are abusing the law under the color of law.
Under normal circumstances, federal agency supervisors and inspectors general would enforce proper legal procedures and protocols and hold accountable those who violate them. But Donald Trump, Stephen Miller, Kristi Noem, Tom Homan, and Greg Bovino have failed their oaths of office and allowed agents under their command to act unconscionably under the color of law. They have given the impression that their actions are immune from investigation or accountability. They are not. We have a duty to ensure that the truth is preserved so the public can know what their elected and appointed officials have done, and so the courts and the Congress can eventually hold people accountable.
So the governor saying he's going to have this commission with this report in January, and the website's going to come soon, and people who want to be able to add to that and provide testimony. He's also encouraging people to continue to go out and film what's happening on the streets with immigration enforcement in Chicago and the surrounding area. I connected with House Minority Leader Tony McCombie, who was critical of the governor's executive order.
Well, it's not surprising. Here we have another executive order that is for political purposes. And, I think the interesting thing is that it's going to be due in January. But nobody's talking about anymore about accountability for the 1,200 children who died under our care during his term and the over 3,000 seriously injured. Where's that report? But mark my words, they'll get this report out because it'll be right before the primary.
McCombie went on to talk about the lack of recognition that some of these, quote, peaceful protesters are getting violent in and around immigration enforcement.
Oh, I think so. Also, this isn't his first attack on law enforcement. And I think we're going to continue to see it next week here in Illinois when they're talking about qualified immunity. And this is really I think the setup for that. It's like the ask for the budget, the 4% cut was a setup for us to have a tax increase. Today's executive order is a setup talking about federal immunity, but really they're going to remove qualified immunity for our own law enforcement here. So this isn't a new thing for the governor or the majority party to attack law enforcement. And, we side with the side of law enforcement. Our main job is public safety, and to continue to do a call for people to go out, take videos, be disruptors, I think is just only going to continue to add flames to the fire. And to even add to that, you look at, he says in this thing this morning, this press conference this morning, that, well, this isn't how federal agents should be doing this. This isn't how it works. They should be putting out warrants and collaborating with our law enforcement. Well, he's expanded the Trust Act to the extent that law enforcement couldn't collaborate with federal agents. So that's on him too. And
that issue of the Trust Act, something possible could come up at the Illinois General Assembly, which meets Tuesday, this coming week, for the final 3 days of fall veto session. We'll talk a lot more about that Monday, so be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell to wake up with us each and every weekday morning here for Illinois in Focus Daily. But McCombie saying, hey, the Trust Act, it's already keeping local law enforcement from communicating with federal immigration authorities, and they may be looking to enhance it as Democrats look to, quote, Trump-proof Illinois.
At this point, Greg, I'm not really sure. It's pretty expanded as far as it is. I think there was some talk about hospitals, which we don't have a problem now that I'm aware of from hospitals with ICE going in or anybody going into hospitals. So I think we'll see some kind of similar to what the mayor of Chicago did about being on Chicago-owned, land, that they're not allowed to stage there. I think you're going to see maybe some of that on a statewide basis.
again, fall veto session begins. Final 3 days, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. We will bring you the latest each and every weekday morning here with Illinois in Focus Daily. Where's this going to go? Be sure to get to the website. Even over the weekend, the news is going to break, especially if the U.S. Supreme Court comes out with any kind of ruling on that preliminary injunction of using the Guard to assist ICE on the streets of Chicago. We'll definitely get that updated and talk about it Monday if it happens, but obviously be here Monday because we got tons of other stuff to tackle, all right? It's Illinois in Focus Daily. There's always something going on in Illinois, and that's why we do this daily with the Center Square.